Hi everyone, it's John from What Up and welcome back to another video. Now this video is going to be a little bit different than most of my normal videos. I usually do news videos on the Wheel of Time on Prime or explain videos about the Wheel of Time series. This one is an actual interview with another content creator, Lauren from Unraveling the Pattern. Now Lauren is a computer animation professor, so he knows a lot about things that I know nothing about. And so we decided that we would chat about special and visual effects and how we think it would go over in the first season of Wheel of Time. Now, this video is hugely lengthy. I even split it into two parts, and it's still really long. I think I had over 2.5 hours of raw footage to choose from. So we had a great time making the video. We had a great time chatting, and I hope you enjoy the video as much as I do. Now, I've also included a community section of this video, so stay tuned at the end of it for that. And if you've already watched the video or you're watching it in shifts, I've left a link to the community section down below in the description box. Now, in today's community section, I'm featuring Wheel Talk by Recappa Sedai. It's a brand new YouTube channel, so it's in its infancy. It's only a few weeks old. So please stay tuned to the end of this video to check that out. Now, one other thing I will mention is that we are slowly creeping up towards 2,500 subscribers, and at 2,500 subscribers, I'm going to give away another What Up t-shirt and a What Upper bottle, so another What Up water bottle. So once we hit that, I'll do a live stream, I'll chat with you folks, and then we'll do the giveaway shortly after that. All right, so with that being said, if you haven't already subbed to the channel, please do so. Sooner we hit 2,500, sooner I can send out another one of these What Up t-shirts. All right, let's get on to the video. Hi everyone, it's John from What Up. Welcome back to another video. Today I have Lauren from Unraveling the Pattern with me, and we're going to talk a little bit about special effects and visual effects. Lauren, you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your expertise?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here. Yeah, my name is Lauren. I run the Unraveling the Pattern YouTube channel, which is pretty new. I'm a huge fan of the Wheel of Time, and I'm a huge fan of television. And so I'm excited today to talk about some of the things that we look forward to in the upcoming show, specifically related to like visual effects and how they're going to deal with magic and all these other things. Do you mind if I give a little introduction about myself?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Talk a little bit.
Let us know what you do and how you know what you know.
So, a lot of this started for me when I was a kid, and I watched some big movies on the big screen. I remember seeing Jurassic Park, and that sort of changed how I thought about media and things. That movie just affected me. And one of the things that's really cool about Jurassic Park is at the time they didn't really have the ability to do a lot of CGI, and so they had to use a lot of practical effects, right? They had to mix in practical and CGI. If you go back and watch that film, a lot of it still stands up. There's a few scenes that are, they've dated. They're dated because of the CGI.
It's 20 years
but
ago.
Anyway, so movies like that just kind of started those wheels spinning for me. When I was maybe 12 or 13, I saw an animated show on TV called Wallace and Gromit. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah, we have it up here too.
Yeah, it's like a clay animation, little short films from Great Britain. Those things were mind blowing to me when I saw those short films, and I was like, I have got to do this. I've got to figure out a way to do this. When I was 14, I got a job working for a guy in my neighborhood who ran a little T-shirt printing shop, and I was able to earn enough money over the course of the summer to finally buy my first video camera. I didn't know anything about video cameras, but I went and bought this cheap little, well, it wasn't cheap, it was expensive for me. It was like $600. But I bought this like little mini VHS camcorder. And one of the things that was special about it is it had the ability to record like quarter-second increments.
Oh, wow.
Which I thought is how stop motion was done at the time. I didn't realize still cameras, right?
Yeah.
Stop motion animation. So anyway, I got the camera. After a long summer of hard work, I built these little clay figures. I started doing this animation, and after like hours and hours of work, I had like less than 10 seconds of animation. And I was like, this isn't worth it at all. It took a whole summer for me to realize I didn't actually want to do that for a living. But now I had this camcorder, and I was like, I got to make movies. So I started making movies with my buddies. We started making all these stupid movies. We were big fans of a show called The X-Files.
Yeah.
And we made a parody movie called The Fed X-Files. We thought we were so funny. But one of the things that stood out to me when we made that is the opening title sequence in The X-Files. It had that sort of like mysterious aliens, people pointing up at like UFOs in the sky. I don't know if you remember all this from that show. Yeah, but that stuff intrigued me. And so my friends and I decided we needed to recreate that title sequence. And so we started shot for shot trying to recreate it. And again, I was just using like a VHS camera. We did have a cheap old computer that we were trying to do some video editing on, but it wasn't the best. We were doing a lot of VHS to VHS tape editing. And eventually we came up with some really crazy ideas. For example, we wanted to get this grungy, textury background in one of our shots. And I thought, hey, my freckles are kind of a nice texture. And so I zoomed in on my freckles, which were a lot more distinct back then. And I took some footage of that, and then we were able to get some still frames of that and manipulate that using kind of like an old version of Photoshop. And we got this like cool texture that we liked. And that kind of thing just blew my mind. We wanted to have a silhouette of a guy flying through space.
Yeah.
And so we were like, we've heard of this thing called blue screens. You know what else is blue? The sky is blue. So we got up on the roof of my house with the blue sky in the background, and we shot it with my old VHS camera. And we're like doing this on the roof, like pretending we're silhouettes, you know? Anyway, creating all of that was just like a really cool experience for me.
Mm.
Taking these like raw materials that we shot and then messing with them in computers and using my tape decks and stuff, and trying to make all that stuff work. I fell in love with this process of creating art from scratch that's in a video format.
Mm.
And so, you know, I've mentioned this before on some podcasts and things, but some of the first things I ever looked up on the internet, before we even had the internet at my house, I would go to the local library and I would get on there, like dial up there, and I would look up Wheel of Time theories, because I was so into those books.
Yep.
And I would look up animation, like Wallace and Gromit. How is it done? How are visual effects done? That stuff just really intrigued me. When I got into college, I thought, you know, I had seen Lord of the Rings at that point, and I thought I was going to be the next Peter Jackson, like everyone thinks when they start film studies. But I eventually realized, no, it's really the post-production, and specifically sort of like the cool graphics and effects that interest me. So
yeah,
that's the stuff that I sort of focused on. And eventually, I came to learn about this program called Adobe After Effects, which is a program I use daily in my work life. That's what I use to create my current channel.
And what you used to create my my intro for my channel as well.
That's right. That's right. I did. And so I've been teaching now. I've been teaching Adobe After Effects at the university where I graduated for the last 12 years. I actually teach at the same university where Brandon Sanderson teaches his creative writing class. Which
that's super neat.
Yeah. And so I've seen him there a few times. But anyway, so it's been really fun just to take two things that I love, you know, animation and the Wheel of Time, and combine them into something. And I'm just so excited for my YouTube channel. I wish I could work on it every day, all day. Of course I can't, you know, real life gets in the way, but I'm just so excited to do that. And to have the TV show coming out, of course, I've seen it a certain way in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I want it to be this perfect thing. We'll see. We'll see if it matches what I hope it will. But
I'm pretty much the same way. I think I know how I want it to look, but I'm sure it won't look anything like I think in my head.
Yeah,
I'm okay with that though, because there are a lot of smarter people out there than me. So
yeah. Anyway, that's a little bit about me. I'm excited to talk about specifics about visual effects and the Wheel of Time.
Awesome. So before we get started here, I want to give everyone who's watching spoiler warning. We are going to be covering visual and special effects, what we think, or more specifically what Lauren thinks, because he knows way more about this than I do, for the first season. So if you haven't read at least the first book, The Eye of the World, be forewarned, there are some things that are going to come up during this discussion that may ruin certain parts of the book for you. We won't be discussing plot lines in detail, but some scenes in the book may be ruined. All right, let's get into the discussion. So when we talk about the Wheel of Time show, we know for a fact it's a fantasy show, and fantasy shows are heavy in special and visual effects, 100%. And I think the first thing that you wanted to talk about was the title sequence, because that's the first thing we're going to see as well. And what comes to my mind when I think of title sequences for fantasy shows, Game of Thrones. That's the first thing I think of.
Yeah, me too. You know, I've been trying to think of examples of TV shows that have come out recently that I kind of hope the Wheel of Time can emulate, right? Mm-hmm. And Game of Thrones, of course, is the first one that comes to everyone's mind. When Game of Thrones first started, I had not yet read the books when I started watching the TV show. And I remember that title sequence feeling a little bit boring to me. Like, come on, let's get into it. You know, like it was a little long, to be honest. And this is someone who loves title sequences. I mean, I make title sequences. That's what I do. So then for me, what stood out with the title sequence of Game of Thrones was the music. After a while, just hearing that music start got me so excited, you know?
You don't have to know anything about the show at all, but most people know at least the music for the opening.
Exactly. And so, this isn't even related necessarily to visual effects, but I really hope whatever musical themes they choose for this show will resonate the way that Game of Thrones did. That would be huge,
It would
right?
be amazing. He has mentioned that some special guests may be coming on for musical special guests, and I don't know what that means. Whether they be big name composers or popular music or whatnot. But I hope that they at least get Witcher or Game of Thrones type music. Like the Witcher, like
Agreed.
toss a coin to your Witcher. That's everywhere now. Like my daughter sings it all day, every day. So I
It's
don't
so
think
true.
Tinker in the Kitchen would be, or Coming Home from Tarwin's Gap will be similar because they're not quite as jaunty. But yeah, we hope so.
They could be, they could, that could be something they adapt, right? To make it a little more catchy or something.
Yeah.
But music aside, another show that stands out when I think about title sequences is Westworld.
Yes.
One of the things I love about Westworld's title sequence is it's very black and white, which is also kind of how the iconography of the Wheel of Time is.
Mm-hmm.
You've got that duality. I mean, it's right in your logo, right? The
Yeah. Yeah.
the sort of black and white Aes Sedai symbol. You've got this sort of these icons that represent things in the show that aren't ever actually in the show in that opening title sequence. Things like, without giving spoilers away for the TV show Westworld, things like mechanical horses and bulls and this symbolism or these symbols of the human body or the robotic bodies being created, these really awesome tight close-ups and sort of, I think you could do some really cool things with the Wheel of Time where maybe you're showing a wheel spinning or you're showing the Aes Sedai symbol with some great music. That would be awesome. But one of the things that makes the Game of Thrones title sequence so memorable, and as you go back and watch it, you realize the title sequence at the start of each Game of Thrones episode is not the same.
They all change based on episode and what happens in the episode.
Yeah, they actually focus in on the map of the sections where we'll be during that episode, which is so brilliant, especially when you're dealing with a new world in a fantasy world,
Mm-hmm.
and you need to kind of acclimate people to what is west, what is east, what is south. You know, refocusing in on that map again and again really helps to solidify that. And I think the Wheel of Time has the benefit of everything sort of being on one continent for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, people who aren't familiar with the maps of the Wheel of Time are going to feel confused as travel happens, right? So I think that's a brilliant
100%.
thing that they do in the opening of Game of Thrones. I don't know if I want to see them just copy that whole map idea.
And I don't think they will either. I think that there's going to be enough elements of the show that's going to be similar to Game of Thrones that they're probably not going to want a title sequence that's even remotely the same. I think they
Right.
may go a completely different direction just because, well, they don't want to be said, well, they're copying off Game of Thrones type thing.
True. And one of the things that the Wheel of Time benefits from is all these different sort of symbols and icons. I think they could really, I mean, I've been using that in my channel, and I've had the benefit of just kind of creating everything from scratch without any sort of like design guide. I'm just kind of having fun as I go. It would be great if they sort of establish a look and a feel right at the start. So anyway, the title sequence is the first thing that comes to mind when we talk about visual effects, special effects, title sequences, motion graphics. In a lot of people's minds, these are all kind of the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of distinguish these or differentiate these. So in the film production or in the film industry, typically visual effects refers to things that are done in post-production, things added in using computers, things like CGI, computer-generated images. Or a lot of times what happens in visual effects is removing things that shouldn't have been there when they shot it.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if you're shooting in Prague and there's a modern city in the background that you can't remove from your shot while you're shooting, they will do that in post.
Yes, yeah.
Right. That's an example of a VFX,
Like the
a
airplane that they
visual
missed
effect.
in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, exactly. Or like that. Now, this is probably just a set issue, but when they have that coffee cup in that Game of Thrones episode.
Yes,
you know.
yeah, that's a good one.
But so that could have been painted out if someone had caught it before the edit went out, right? So VFX doesn't just apply to all the cool flashy stuff,
Mhm.
although it does. There's more VFX in shows than you realize. A lot of things are shot on green screens and you never know. In the most like generic TV shows, a lot of things like set extensions are done. Most sets aren't fully built, right? If you see a sweeping shot of the two rivers, chances are some of the buildings in the background will be added in post. right?
So
It's not all built.
it'd be like a generic village number one, the one big set that we've seen pictures of, could be 30 different villages based on camera
Right.
angles and different VFX and different things they add. Like that, kind of?
Absolutely. Yeah, potentially. Yeah. And some of those things may never exist physically. Some of those buildings may only exist in a computer generated world, but we won't really notice that stuff too much. Sometimes when you see like a big wide shot, this happened in The Witcher a lot. I noticed when they would do like wide shots of like a castle or a city, it often felt CGI.
Yeah,
And Game of
well,
Thrones does that as well.
I'm a big fan of practical effects of all. Like, I grew up on the '80s horror movies and stuff, which were mostly practical effects. And I've cited it a couple times in my videos. I don't like CGI if I can tell it's CGI.
Right.
So Blade 2, the big fight sequence in front of the lights, that's the best example I can get of really terrible CGI that made it into, at the time, a big budget movie, because
Right.
it just looked terrible. But I mean, the standards today obviously are a bit different, so I'm hoping that we get CGI in it that you can't really tell is CGI, which is, would be good for me, at least, anyway.
And I feel the same way. I mean, a good VFX artist is someone who you don't notice when they did a good job. Because you didn't realize that they painted that sign out, or that they added that building in the background, or that they added a little bit of smoke to that already existing fire. Those are the types of things that when you don't notice it, they did their job well.
Yes,
It's when you do notice it, when you see that dragon at the end of The Witcher, some people cringed at that. They were like, "Ew, that doesn't feel right,"
looks
So
like Dragonheart from the '90s.
right.
Yeah.
Which I remember. The funny thing is, I remember seeing Dragonheart in the '90s and being blown away by it.
At the
But
time,
now you go
I was
back,
younger too, but it was amazing.
right? Now you go back and it has not held up well, right?
No.
Like that's just the nature of it. My kids, we watch movies all the time, and my kids are like, "Oh, that looks terrible," and I'm like, "Hey, don't diss it," because for me, it was a big deal, right? But anyway, so visual effects are things that are added in the computer or removed in the computer, things that shouldn't be in the shot. And obviously, this includes things like green screen, right? There are a lot of things that are added in post. They also have these things called matte paintings, big, huge, sweeping skylines and cities and skies, all these things. That stuff a lot of times is added in post. So that's VFX or visual effects. Special effects refers to actual like explosions, actual fire, actual smoke, actual effects that are physical on the set. These are
Muppets
things that
even,
are rigged to explode, or things that are rigged to blow over, or whatever. That's special effects. So those are kind of the differences there. I don't have a lot of experience with special effects. I actually don't do a lot of actual shooting. Almost all of my job is in the computer.
Okay.
And then there's motion graphics. Motion graphics is actually what I do for a living. Motion graphics is when you see those really fancy car commercials with all kinds of cool effects and things going on. I mean, you've kind of seen this in my channel, right? It's the bling, it's the flashy stuff that's cool to look at and it's pretty, but it doesn't fit in any real world environment.
Yeah,
right?
it draws the eye and makes you look at it, but like if you're doing your sweeping shot of, say, the woods, it wouldn't fit at all.
Right. And so for me, that's why I think about things like the title sequence. It's like, I want this to help establish this show. I want it to give me the music that gets me pumped up for the show. I want it to do some of the same things Game of Thrones does, but hopefully in its own way, right? In its own unique way. Alternatively, don't use a title sequence. That's also a possibility. Not all shows have to have a title sequence. Sometimes you can just jump right in. Right. Now, the whole the Wheel of Time turns and ages come and pass. That is such a important beginning to every book. I wouldn't be surprised if they somehow incorporated that into the opening title sequence in some way.
Or even have just that with maybe a sweeping shot of whatever they're opening up as, and then it begins the show without a full title sequence, which would be nice.
Yeah. And a lot of times, too, pilot episodes don't have a title sequence. Often the title sequence comes in the second episode. So, and I think that's important because they need to get into it in a pilot episode. They can't make people sit there and watch a 2-minute title sequence, right? When no one even knows what this show is yet. And so it'll be interesting to see how they approach it. But anyway, those are some of my thoughts about the title sequence. I'd be curious to know what people in the comments think. Like, what do they want to see in the opening title sequence? Because that stuff fascinates me.
Yeah, let us know down below in the comments if you guys have any ideas of what you think the opening title sequence should be. Should it be more similar to Game of Thrones, The Witcher, C? I don't know if you've seen that one on the Apple streaming service. It's with Jason Momoa. It's a fantastic show. If you haven't, it's really, really good. Or no title sequence, or just a voiceover. I mean, we have no idea what they're going to do. Rafe has said in his actual last Q&A, the surprise visit to the DragonCon panel the other day, where he has said he's seen a few of the episodes. He's been watching them over and over again. To me, that says that they're mostly done and that he can at least view them, right? So maybe they already have something made and we don't even know.
That would be amazing. If not, hey, hit me up, Amazon. I want to help with the title sequence.
Rafe, Sarah, he does consult work.
Yeah.
All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to dive through the first book and try to take it, maybe not scene by scene, but things that we expect to see on screen for the first season, at the very least, that they're going to have to either use special or visual effects for. I've said it before, I don't think they're going to do the prologue just because Winter's Dragon is such a byword among the Wheel of Time community. They may just completely leave it out because a lot of people don't like it. Now, I enjoy it, and I take a lot of flack for enjoying it because it was my first real look at Wheel of Time other than fan stuff, and I like Billy Zane anyway. I mean, I like B movies, and Billy Zane's in a lot of B movies. So, but if they don't do the prologue, the first thing, what is the first thing you think of when it comes to the opening chapters of the books that we'll have to see as far as special or visual effects?
Yeah, I'm kind of the same opinion as you. I don't think they'll start with the prologue. I do personally believe they will at some point show the prologue.
Yeah.
My personal hope is that they keep the secret of who the Dragon Reborn is a little bit more mysterious than the book does. And that in the episode, when it is finally revealed, that maybe that episode starts with the prologue. I think that would be kind of a cool...
that would be a really good way of doing it, I think.
Way to do it.
Because my personal opinion is...
What's that? Sorry.
It explains what the dragon is, and then they can go in and then they reveal whoever the dragon is. I'm not going to say
agreed, because the show has to kind of give us little crumbs. It can't just milk before meat, right? we need to kind of introduce this world gradually to people. And my feeling is I really do think we're not going to get deep into the Great Hunt in the first season. That's a whole nother discussion. But I do think the finale, or at least the big moment before Tarwin's Gap and everything, will be the same episode where we see the prologue, if we see it at all.
Yeah.
That's my personal opinion.
Sense, yeah.
The tricky thing there, of course, is casting Lews Therin and other things, but because he doesn't really appear again until much later, but we can get into that in another discussion.
Yeah.
As far as where I think the sort of the visual effects or special effects in the movie start, I think it's the empty road. That empty road when Rand first sees the Myrddraal. I mean, this is the first time, this is the first time when we are establishing the look for the Shadowspawn.
Yep.
And this has to be done well. And, one of the things that I've been concerned about is how do you make a scary looking creature's cloak still while all the wind is blowing all around them, and not make that really corny or look like a visual effect. Yeah. It's going to look like they were set into a scene and they're not actually there. And I've actually thought maybe they just do away with the stiff cloak, or not so much stiff cloak as a cloak that isn't affected by the elements. And you had a really good point that you brought up off camera. Do you want to talk about that?
For those of you who are watching that have seen Ash vs. Evil Dead, towards the end of the first season, when there's a demon that Ash fights, and the camera shots they use and the way they do it, the demon shakes and it moves a little funny, and it just seems completely out of touch with reality, and it'll disappear and reappear in different spots. I think something like that would be really, really good for the fades, and it wouldn't look cheap or unnatural, like you're saying, like a completely still cloak. It may not be completely true to the books, but again, it's an adaptation. They're going to change some stuff. They have to. And I think you said also off camera that a lot of stuff doesn't translate well to screen. Right. So if the still cloak doesn't translate well to screen, they may have to do something else. They'll have to do something to show that they're evil or they're not quite human. But what it is, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, I love the idea of it sort of shifting in and out of reality. Like it's almost a blurry, shadowy shape that you're not quite sure what it is. Another big key here is the sound design has to be really on point to make that scary. I mean, when Rand looks at that Myrddraal at the start of the series, he feels fear. He feels for his life is threatened. Yeah, and I hope that they're able to portray that well.
Yeah, him showing it on his face may not be enough. Maybe they'll have fear sounds or fear music, I guess is the best way to put it, and that when he's staring at the Myrddraal and it's looking back at him, and they show something that way.
Now that said, it would be really cool if there are moments when that sort of blurry shifting shape is solid, when it does fully appear and frightens the boys in certain ways. You know, skipping forward a little bit, the next time we see a Murdral very clearly is when Rand is, and we may not see this in the show, but when Rand is pulling Tam on the cart to the two rivers, and we see that Murdral leading them, and he's on his scary horse. I guess one of the concerns I have is we do want parallels to the ring wraiths in Lord of the Rings, but we don't want it to look just like a cheap knockoff of the ring wraiths. The cloaked,
you don't have a black horse with like nails in its hooves and blood dripping, like Peter Jackson did. I mean, it was really great, but you don't want to have them copy, so to speak, right?
Exactly. It needs to be its own thing, and I think this whole idea of it shifting in and out of reality is actually a really cool concept. But every once in a while, it's solid. When they're in Barlone and the Murdral is about to kill Rand, it needs to be solid. We need to see its costume. We need to see its eyeless face. We need to see that sluggish skin, right? Those are the kinds of things that absolutely better be practical, right? They better have really cool makeup and a really cool costume design for that. And I'm sure they will. I doubt they'll make those close-ups CGI for those types of things.
Well, there's a stuntman that's gone on record already that has said he's been hired to be a Trolloc. He's the only one. But, you know, we see, obviously, we'll skip ahead maybe to Winternight here, the attack on the village, when there's dozens of Trollocs attacking the village. They're not going to have dozens of actors. It just won't happen. It's not economical for them to do that. How much time and money would it take for them to make a bunch of CGI Trollocs not look CGI? Do you know what I mean?
Right. So this is one of the things they did for the Lord of the Rings movies. And this is also one of the reasons, in my opinion, why the Hobbit movies are not as well received. Because they did so much stuff practically in the Lord of the Rings. And then they just chose to make like the goblins CGI in the Hobbit movies later. And to me, that kind of pulled me out of it a little bit. But one of the things they did, though, is they had this one actor. He was a guy from New Zealand. And he played tons of different orcs, right? But the cool thing about orcs or Trollocs is they look so different from each other that it could be the same dude wearing a mask, right? It doesn't have to be... It could be one giant dude that they just kind of shoot in different ways using different costumes. And that's what they did. So, you know, the guy who talks about eating maggoty bread in the Two Towers, I think it is who it is. That same one is the one who shoots the arrows and kills Boromir.
Yeah, right? So they reuse actors or extras, right. Maybe not main actors, but extras for a bunch of different roles, which would be...
And I really hope, you know, I've seen Carnival Row, and I believe the guy who did some of the puppets and makeup and stuff in that is also working on the Wheel of Time. Is that correct?
Yes. Like I heard his name is, I have it written here actually, and I'm gonna butcher it, Miroslav Przechetl. So he worked in Carnival Row, but not just Carnival Row. He did Spider-Man Far From Home, Underworld, Blood Wars, and Nightfall. So Nightfall's another big one there. So Carnival Row and Nightfall are both kind of medieval type fantasy. So he has experience, and Amazon does like to share their staff.
Yeah, and just the fact that he has had that experience making actual puppets and costumes and scary masks. I mean, Carnival Row had some frightening monsters, and some of it was CGI, but it was definitely put on top of practical stuff. So I really think that's the way they're going to go with Trollocs. I think it will be composited, or it will be visual effects in the sense that they may be overlaying different people in different costumes into a single scene. But I don't think that they're just going to be CGI characters. Now, in big war scenes, that's a different story. If we skip ahead even further, before we talk, you know, in depth about the One Power, like the first battle sequence that I hope they do not skip is one that's often forgotten because it's so short, but it's before they enter Shadar Logoth.
Yes, with the big line of Trollocs and the Fade in the middle, and they come over the hill, and they're right there. I think that would be amazing to see on screen. I really hope they don't skip that.
I agree. And that's the first, and there's even a point, I think, when one of the boys, it might be Matt or Rand, says like, so this is what it's like to be in a battle. This is what it's like to be in war, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
Like, I just survived my first battle. That is such an important thing to Robert Jordan, because he was a young man who went to war.
Yeah, he was a war veteran, right? So he was
right.
able to write battles in such a way that vets, and I don't know how many vets watch the channel, or people who are in the military, can understand, because battles aren't exciting. They're not cool. They're scary and horrible, and they're over quicker than you think, realistically, for most people.
Yeah, and I think Robert Jordan was a young man who probably experienced some of that. And so he to sort of understand that fear, to understand that what you're doing is right, but scary. and to have these boys flung into this very dangerous situation. I hope they can capture the fear. In the Game of Thrones series, there's an episode called Battle of the Bastards,
Mm-hmm.
and that episode did such a phenomenal job of capturing sort of like that suffocating fear of crowds of people surrounding you on a battlefield. And that's how I feel like this scene with the Trollocs outside of Shadar Logoth is. I feel like, I mean, there's even, I think Matt even gets pulled off of his horse at one point
Yeah,
by
I
a
think he gets
catchpole.
a catchpole tangled in his cloak and he's pulled down.
Yeah, I mean, just the fear of that would be so absolutely frightening. So I really hope that they don't skip that.
Mm.
It happens so quickly in the book that it's easy to kind of gloss over it. But and then of course there is Moraine creating fire, which she straight up says women are weak in fire, and then she
Yeah,
does this huge fire
big
pillar
big
that just
wall of
shows how
flame.
amazing she is. She's incredible, right? Anyways, that's kind of my feeling on Shadowspawn. Any other things you want to mention with
As
Shadowspawn?
far as the Shadowspawn go, the only other Shadowspawn we really see in the first book would be a Drahakar, and that's
True.
from a distance. So that would be. Do you think that would be somebody in a costume that they would maybe green screen to show in the air, or would they CGI something like that?
To me, it's almost just like a silhouette crossing the moon,
Yeah.
right? That's something they would probably do in CGI.
Okay.
Now, in future seasons, yeah, they're going to need someone.
Yeah, when they get
I
the
think of a
close ups,
drag
when they're
car
coming
as
down, they're doing the crooning and they're trying to
right.
eat people's souls. Yeah, they need somebody there, but I think that's the only instance of Drahakar in the first book is that first flight from the Two Rivers,
Right,
and
I
it's
think you're
hunting
right.
them as they go up to Terran Ferry.
And then, we could also talk about the blight at the end of the book. I
Yep.
mean, boy, there's some scary stuff there. I want a sort of Pan's Labyrinth or uh, like the old Jim Henson movies,
Like
Dark
Labyrinth
Crystal
or Dark Crystal,
or
things like that.
Labyrinth, like the trees and stuff coming to life and the sort of that scary feeling. I also hope that stuff is practical, but they're going to have to supplement that with CGI to make the blight feel as scary and deep and broad as it is.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that isn't close up will have to be added in post, right? But
Absolutely. I would like to see like the close up stuff, like you're saying, as practical because it's hard to do something very close. It's interacting, especially with them. So if
right.
a Trolloc is grabbing something, hauling them off a horse, or fighting with somebody, it's hard for the actor, I think, to interact with somebody who's unless they have a mocap suit, which is possible.
But
They can do stuff
even
like that.
it's usually noticeably bad, right? It doesn't
Yeah,
look great. Yeah. Well, and again, that's probably cheaper to go the practical route,
mm.
right? I would imagine. I mean,
And I
you
think I
shoot
don't
it and
think
then you
they've
have it.
I don't think they've released a budget for the episodes individually yet, but the rumor was 6 to 8 million per episode, which is huge. That's Game of Thrones final seasons style
Yeah.
budget. That's really big.
And watching that last season of Game of Thrones, you could tell they saved the budget for all the dragon shots.
Yeah, even as bad as it was.
Right. But I really felt you could tell that they intentionally did things sort of in closed quarters
Mhm.
so that when they had these big epic shots, they had budget for that.
Yeah,
Some of the big war scenes, some of the scenes with like the Night King and of course the dragons and stuff. It's unfortunate, right, that TV shows have to do that, but that's the reality of it. You can't have every single scene be as epic as it is in a book because you can't afford that. Now, if the show is successful, maybe we'll get $15 or $20 million budgets per episode in future episodes. Who knows?
which is part of the reason why I've said that like, people who read the books and love Wheel of Time and who are the fans and attend Jordan Con and all of us, we're not going to be the core audience. Not really.
Right.
I mean, they're going to do fan service for us, of course, but the core audience are people like I think I said it in a couple of videos. My wife, who does not read these books, she never read Game of Thrones, but she watched it and enjoyed it. Those are the people they want because then they can get 20, 30 million viewers versus I couldn't tell you how many Wheel of Time fans there are in the world that will watch the show. I'm pretty sure most of them will, but it's not that many. Not 20 or 30
Right.
million for sure. And they're going to
Yeah.
want as much of an audience as they can. So they're going to try
I
to make it
completely
slick
agree.
and cool and appeal to them.
And I don't know if we live in a world where an Amazon Prime fantasy show will ever become as large as Game of Thrones did, but I sure hope we come close. I mean, Saturday Night Live references Game of Thrones all the time.
Yes,
You
yeah.
know, it would
It's
be
become
amazing
a
if we
household
could
name.
get
Even people who have never seen it know what it is.
right. It's referenced in so many pop culture moments. I mean, to have the Wheel of Time be referenced in that way would be, to me, if I were Rafe, I would say I made it. You know, if someone references it somewhere, that would be huge.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my hope as well. That being said, you're right though. They're not going to satisfy all the fans,
Yeah.
and let's just accept that. Let's move on. This is what I hope to do, and I've mentioned this before. I want to be sort of an apologist for the Wheel of Time TV show, unless it just absolutely sucks, which I just don't think
if
it
it's
will.
Legend of the Seeker, I mentioned
Right.
that before, and there are people who like that show. I don't know why. I'm sorry. It was bad. It was worse than the books, and the books were bad. I mean, and that's all I
Yeah.
can say. As long as it's not that level, I'm happy. Sword of Shannara or the Chronicles of Shannara was okay as a TV show. It was not. A lot of the hardcore fans of the books weren't super impressed with it because it was an adaptation. They had to change certain things to make it fit for TV, but it was still a pretty good show.
Yeah.
If we're somewhere between that and Game of Thrones, I'd be super happy.
Me too. I mean, even the new Dark Crystal show and Game of Thrones, somewhere between those,
Dark
or The
Dark
Witcher
Crystal show is
and Game of
great.
Thrones. Yeah. So, you know, I have high hopes, but I am probably going to die on that hill. If people hate it, I'm going to try to love it as long as I can.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to try to be apologetic about it. And when it comes to the VFX, that's a big fear that everyone has. But you know what? They're limited. They're limited by budget.
Yeah.
They have to make certain decisions. They have to cut things. If you've heard that term as a writer, kill your darlings, they're going to have to do that a lot when it comes to this show. And so I'm going to be pretty forgiving of a few bad shots. You know, this brings up an interesting story. When I used to watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. a lot, which is a show that Rafe Judkins was
he
directly
was a
involved
showrunner
with.
for that for a number of years. Yes.
Yeah. And that was a great show.
It was a
I
very
didn't
good show,
finish
yeah.
the show. I'm not caught up on it, but I think I watched maybe the first 4 seasons. There was this particular episode where I thought some of the shots were good, some of the VFX shots were bad. There's another thing to consider. When you're making a show, let's say that a movie has, I'm pulling this number out of nowhere, I don't know, but let's say a movie has 1,000 shots.
Yeah.
Okay. If 200 of those need VFX, each of those shots is done individually, sometimes by different companies. It's not like one guy is doing each shot, right? And so you're going to have a variety of quality in your shots in a show. So I was watching this one episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and I mentioned to a guy at work that I was disappointed by some of the shots in that particular episode. And it just so happens that that guy worked on that episode.
Oh my God.
He was hired to work on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. for a studio he worked on in California. He didn't like living that sort of studio life, so he moved to where I live in Utah to settle down with a family and to live and to have a more normal life and a normal job where he wasn't working 80-hour weeks on TV. And he had worked on that show, and I didn't even mean to, but I insulted him, right? I mean, he worked hard on it, but at the end of the day, those shows have they have a deadline. They have to go out, and then it's out, and it's out there, and you can't ever improve that shot because it's done.
Yeah,
and so
I get it. I see it all the time in what I do for a job too. Sometimes things are done very, very well. Sometimes things are done not so well, and it's accepted just so you can move on and do the next thing.
Exactly. So I think let's just remember there are people behind all this. Like there are people making decisions. There are people working hard. There are probably people working too hard and losing sleep to try to get these shows done for us. And you know what? If it's not perfect, you always have your imagination with the books, right? That's kind of my hope.
I've said it a number of times. It's an adaptation. I know it won't be the same. It can't be shot for shot. And even I know the qualities. I'm not going to be blown away start of episode 1. And, well, I might be because I'm a super fan. But not everyone's going to be blown away from start of episode 1 till the end of episode 8. There are going to be times when, it's boring. There's probably going to be times when you're not impressed with CGI or not impressed with a special effect. There's going to be times when you're going to wonder, why did they do this now? It's going to change this, this, and this later on down the line. But yeah, like you said, there's a lot of people working very hard on it, and not everything can be perfect. It's very easy for someone to sit in front of their computer and go, this is terrible. You're an idiot.
Exactly.
But they don't realize that the amount of work even to get to where it disappointed them was probably far more than they would ever do. So
exactly. Now I know we've gotten on a bit of a tangent here, but these are the things. These are the things that I think about. I'm like, let's cut these guys a break. Like it's going to be tough to get every shot right and to impress every fan. So anyway.
All right. So another one of the things that we're going to have to see on screen are the big cities. and they're going to be some practical. We've seen the locations. We've seen shots from some of the locations, whether they're leaked or official, from papers in Slovenia and the Czech Republic, among other locations. And that's fairly standard. I'm going to say fairly standard as far as VFX goes, because it's done so often, and it's going to be generic fantasy city number 2, and the big shots will be probably of real buildings, or the inside shots will be of real buildings. But one of the things I really want to talk about is the ways. So in the books, we've seen the waygate. It's a practical build, or what most people accept as a waygate, because they've never really told us if it's a waygate or a portal stone, but it looks nothing like a portal stone. So we know they're going to CG a little bit of that, like the portal going in, and maybe the doors and stuff as well. But inside the ways, in the books, it's barren. It's just a black nothingness with some broken waystones and bridges. How do you think they're going to do that? Do you think it'll just be a dark room, or will they CG all that in? Or
yeah, that's a really good question. First of all, when that first image of what we assume is a waygate was leaked, there were so many people saying that can't be a waygate. That's not how waygates look. They're made of flowing rock that almost feels like vines or leaves, right? Yeah. And I don't think people understand what that is that we're seeing there. That piece that is there exists as some sort of architecture, in my opinion, I should say. It exists as some sort of architecture that was built around the existing waygate. And you can tell by some of the other leaked images later with the green screen behind it.
Right in the middle there, where
the gate itself, the literal flowing, viney-looking stone doors that open will absolutely be CGI. I don't think there's any other way you can do that. And I think it will look great. I don't think we have to worry about that looking bad. I think, you mentioned that cities are pretty standard. I completely agree. Things like buildings and cities, even landscapes, most of the time, even when the CGI is not perfect, we are pretty forgiving. Yeah. The stuff where we have the hardest time is fluid movement of humanoid type creatures and animals and that kind of stuff, right? Even animals, a lot of CGI animals you can get away with these days in some instances, but
Call the Wild with Harrison Ford.
Yeah, sometimes no.
That was really bad. I mean, I wouldn't even watch the movie because of the trailer.
I only saw the trailer, but yeah, I agree. That was unfortunate. But I bet you couldn't have a dog actor for that stuff, right? I mean, it would have been impossible for a lot of it. But anyway, so I think where our human brains are built to identify human faces so well that there are times when they're just we see it's wrong and it feels wrong to us. There's this thing called the uncanny valley, which is a term used in animation and robotics. And there is this, if something looks like a robot, we don't get freaked out by it. But if it looks human but not human enough, it's called the uncanny valley. It feels like this weird attempt at being human, and it makes us uncomfortable. And that, you remember like the movie Polar Express back in the day? A lot of people had a hard time with the human-looking characters in that because a lot of the movie felt real, but the characters almost felt like they were dead in the eyes. That's the uncanny valley. That's what we're talking about.
I didn't like Tom Hanks' character. It freaked me out.
Yeah, it's creepy. The movie was great in a lot of ways, but the characters in it were creepy. And and that's what I mean by uncanny valley. So this is a term that's been used in animation and robotics for years. Anyway, again, I'm getting tangential a bit here. But when it comes to things like the waygates, I think that stuff's going to look awesome, computer generated, and we're going to have a great time with it. Once we're inside, I don't know if you've watched Stranger Things.
Yes, yep.
But there are moments when Eleven is in essentially what is the void, right? She's in this dark nowhere, and the only thing that's lit is her. Maybe a sort of like shadowy light on the ground, like a reflective, almost like she's in water. It's hard to tell. Yep. And then some of the things she focuses in on are very well lit.
Do you think you'll do something similar to that?
Void. Oh, I don't necessarily want it to be like that, but that's what comes to mind. I actually kind of hope that we see some things like, these sort of decayed rocks and pillars. I wouldn't mind if they went Mines of Moria with it, and you could see deeper than. Yeah. But that's a little bit. It's supposed to be. You're supposed to feel like the light in the ways is
the light from the is just pushing in on you in a little globe. Like it doesn't go out as far as it should.
Right. So I think they'll do both. I think they'll have moments when it feels like they're in a complete void, and then they'll have moments where you can see something that's lit by a torch or a lamp to a certain distance. That great. There's speaking of horror moments, that moment when they come across the Trollocs that have been consumed by the Black Wind,
Oh yeah, and they're in the
or
stone.
maybe it's a trap that was left for them or something. And they get caught in that trap, and their bodies are like, they almost look like they've become statues of themselves that are writhing in pain. And it's almost like this beautiful but freaky statue. I want to see that, and I want to
Oh,
see that kind of up close,
and the thing is with and this is going to be a tangent as well. I did a ratings video not long ago. I think that for the most part, you're going to see a mature series, not just for sex, not just for nudity, although there will probably be a lot of it, but for pure frightening scenes. I mean, it's a horrifying book. It's like reading Stephen King fantasy, like the Dark Tower series. Like Robert Jordan did a really good job of describing the horrors of everything, and then he's like, "Oh, there's boobies. We're not going to talk about that."
Right.
So,
right.
I think just for the pure horror scenes, like that's going to be amazing to see if they do it right and it's not cheesy.
Agreed. And the Black Wind, I've been reading the early books to my older daughter,
Mm.
and when you read the Black Wind, it comes across as super cheesy. When it's like talking about ripping flesh and all this stuff, that
Yeah.
is absolutely terrifying if you have some good sound design
Oh
and you
yeah,
get the
absolutely.
whispers right and everything. But when you're trying to read that out loud, it does come across as a little bit hokey. So,
So, if you had to pick somebody to do the voice of the Black Wind, who?
ooh, I don't know. That's a good one. I mean, for me, it's like it's just got to have some cool effects on it. Um, I haven't thought about that. Who would you? Do you have someone in mind?
If I had to pick somebody to do the voice of the Black Wind, I think, oh, it's going to be a weird one, but I think honestly, someone like Vin Diesel, who most people
Oh
don't
yeah.
know, but he's a voice actor too, and he can change his pitch and inflection and just the way his voice comes across, like the way he talks as Riddick, I think would be
Huh.
really good.
Will Arnett as Batman? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah,
He's got that gravelly voice.
yeah. There you go. Will Arnett. He's the voice. That's official right now.
That's funny.
Danny DeVito.
Or we could go Morgan Freeman. I mean, no.
Yeah, but
That's so
it would
interesting. I've
be,
never thought about that.
yeah, James Woods even.
Hmm.
He would be good at something like that, but I don't think an actual voice of someone speaking. It'd be a bunch of voices all crammed together and just warped. I think would make it really scary and whispery and terrible. But you're
True.
right. When you read it, it's pretty cheesy. You're like, oh, that's not scary at all. But to
You're
see
right though.
something like that,
It's like the whispers of countless souls that have
yeah,
been eaten. But that's what you're hearing. It's like a crowd of people screaming in your ear. I mean, that is terrifying.
yeah,
So I actually like the concept. Now that you bring that up, it's a bunch of voices. It's like women and children and men and
just
people
all of them all crammed
absolutely
together,
frightened.
and like you play with the treble, you play with the bass, you cram all together,
Oh
make
yeah,
some soft, some loud, some. I think it would be to do something like that would be really neat.
really neat. And maybe that subtle whisper of Pat and Fane afterwards.
Yeah.
Right? Of course, I guess that comes later, but
So
the ways are interesting because as far as CGI goes, not a lot needs to be done. I mean, they can shoot all this on a soundstage,
Yep.
right? Which is kind of nice. The lighting is going to be tricky, and I really hope they get that right. But a lot of that can be done in post as well to kind of make it feel like the light is crushing in. I think it'll be interesting to see just how long we spend in the ways. I can't imagine it would be more than a part of an episode.
I think minutes. Like we're
Yeah.
talking like less than 10 minutes probably for the whole first season in the ways is, and that's even if they do the second trip from the Great Hunt when the
Yeah,
girls go
maybe.
to
I
go
just
to
love the
Helmand Head.
ways. I would love it if they'd spend a little more time in there. That scene in Lord of the Rings when they're in the mines
Mhm.
and they're sitting there waiting for Gandalf to remember which way to go because he's forgotten. And Gandalf and Frodo have that little back and forth where Gandalf says Gollum's back there, or someone's following us. I
Mhm.
don't know that I think he says it's Gollum. I mean, there's a very similar scene with Land saying someone's following. With the Hound, right, Pat and
Yeah.
Fane, and then they have this great exchange. These to me, when I watched nae'blis's video about breaking down the show,
Yes. Yeah.
he's absolutely right. It can happen in 4 episodes, but I don't feel like he gave a lot of time for like character development moments where people are sitting around a campfire discussing things and getting to know characters better. I
Yeah.
don't know that he really. I think he was like plot, 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 plot. To me, that moment in the Mines of Moria and Lord of the Rings when they stop And Frodo was like, why don't we just, I can't remember the exact dialogue, but essentially Frodo is saying to Gandalf, Gollum sounds like a miserable wretch. We should just put him out of his misery. And then Gandalf says something like, who is it? It's not for us to decide who should live and die. Like, why would that be up to? It's like a nice little teaching moment between the mentor and the
something like that
mentee.
would be good, where they have an aside, and they get to talk a little bit, and Moraine or Land get to talk, or even Loyal talks a little bit about the ogre and what they are and what they do and why they're there,
Exactly.
or how the ways were grown, or that would be neat.
Well, and in the book, there's this great moment between Rand, Matt, and Perrin when they're all laying there in the ways, and they're essentially like, so how hot was this princess you saw?
They're talking about Elaine. That's right. Yes.
And they talk about is it Elsa Grinwell? Like, it's boys talking about girls in a
horrible situation.
In a horrible situation. That is a great tiny character moment.
That would be fantastic. I hope they keep that in. Yeah. That would be nice.
So anyway, that's my point. I think the ways themselves, the actual quote unquote action, minutes. But you need some sort of breakaway scene where you just get to know these characters while they're surrounded by darkness, and there's a little bit of light in the darkness from these characters. That's a really important thematic thing that I hope they do in the show. I get so tangential, but I really do. I love that idea of taking that time when they're in some of the most scared moments to be like, these are people, and they're sort of lighthearted in a weird way, like the hobbits, So anyway, can we talk about the wolves real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. With the wolves, there's a whole slew of things we could do with the wolves here. Now, we know that they have real wolves on set. Well, I can't say we know for sure because it was never official. It was all behind the scenes stuff, but we can pretty much guess that there's real wolves on set, trained animals. And we've seen I think everybody's seen the video with the white cloak and the wolf. Mm-hmm. But I think you're talking more about how they speak in the World of Dreams, or...
Yeah, I'm talking about sort of World of Dreams stuff, but especially in book one. How do you properly convey this idea of Perrin communicating with these creatures? Because I've seen it done very poorly in some media, where you have talking animals whose mouths actually move. Yeah, you better not see that. No. That would be awful.
I don't want to see that at all.
I don't really want to just hear a floating wolf voice in Perrin's head, because that's weird. But
the pictures don't work, though. They don't translate well to screen, because they speak in pictures and emotion and taste and smell. I can't see them doing that on a screen like the way it's done in the books, because it's one of those things you said, it just doesn't translate well. Like, it would be hard to do that way.
Exactly.
I think that they might just take the easy way out, because it could be a very convoluted, very complicated thing. It could be just the voice in his head, with the wolf looking at him type thing.
Well, or an even easier way out. It's sort of like a Chewbacca Han Solo kind of a thing, where the wolf grunts and makes sounds, and he just translates for the audience.
That actually might even work better than hearing a voice in his head, because it would be him talking out loud back to the wolves, and we'll get his half of the conversation, but he maybe fleshed out a bit so we understand both sides.
Right.
That would be.
I'm not exactly proud of this, but I have seen the Twilight movies.
I've seen them a bunch of times too. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, it's been a long time, but when they have wolves talking to like Bella, that's her name, right?
Yeah, Bella's her name. Yeah.
I think it's just like a voice in their head. Is that right?
Yeah, it was just a voice in her head. She could hear Jacob, I think his name. Like I said, it's been a long time.
Yeah, Jacob. I remember seeing that movie and going, oh, I hope they don't do this in the Wheel of Time. That was like literally the first thing I thought when those wolves communicated. I was like, oh, this is super corny. Maybe it was the dialogue was bad. I don't remember exactly what it was.
I think it's a little bit of everything. That it was. I don't know if it was meant to be cheesy, but it kind of was.
It came across that way. Yeah. I don't know if there's a good way to do it. Now, that being said, moving forward in the series, when Perrin is being trained by Hopper, would it be weird to have Hopper morph into a human-type creature in the World of Dreams as he teaches him and has some dialogue? Would that be weird? I don't know, but...
Well, what you could do there is Perrin just sees him as a human in the World of Dreams when he's being taught, and then sees him as a wolf when he's doing wolf things.
Right.
You could do it that way, too, I guess.
I don't know if that's just something that came to my head. I don't know if that's a good idea.
No, it's a good idea. I think it might work. I honestly don't know how they're going to do it. I think it's going to be... Of all the things that they have to do in the first few seasons, I think, honestly, that'll be one of the most difficult ones for them to figure out is how the wolves are going to talk. It's a small thing, but it's going to be hard.
But another thing they could do is, as sad as it would be, they could just cut Hopper, and they could make Elias, however you say his name. They could make him be the mentor. He could be the one teaching Perrin in the world of dreams.
And you know what? It makes sense too, because I mentioned it before, where you have these actors and actresses who, there's characters in the books that are very prominent in one book, and then you don't see them for 4 or 5 books, and then they're prominent again, and then they go away and they come back. And I know that other fantasy shows and long-running series have recast characters before, and they'll either play it off as kind of a quip at the very first, like, oh, haha, right, you look a little bit different, like Iron Man 2.
Yep.
Or it'll be just ignored completely, and, like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, when the mom changed, nobody really said anything. It just kind of happened.
Or Dumbledore.
Or Dumbledore. Nobody said anything happened. It just accepted that it was changed and moved on. I don't know if they'll have contracts for actors where they say, okay, you're going to do 1 episode in season 1, 2 episodes in season 4, an episode in season 6, 2 episodes. It's so hard. So
it's true. And I'm one of those believers. I'm one of those believers that Peter Franzen is possibly Elias.
Well, I mentioned that the other day when I was on the Dusty Wheel, and not a super popular idea.
Oh, really?
But
to me, it just fits. It makes sense.
I think it fits. I think he's going to be him, and I think that Rena just won't be a thing. His Aes Sedai won't be a thing. It'll be, the Aes Sedai that actually dies in New Spring will still be his.
Exactly.
Because it was one of the things that never really made sense to me reading the books, is that she just fuzzed his bond and left it. Just left him alone. It's fine. Just leave him alone.
And another thing that's smart about it, in my opinion, is it helps explain what happens when a warder's Aes Sedai dies.
Yes.
So that when it eventually happens later to a certain warder we all love, we can understand the impact of it.
Understand what he's going
through. Elias finds the wolves, in my opinion, I think it would be cool if he finds the wolves as a way to cope and to survive.
Yeah, and they help him actually make it through. That would be
right.
I think that would be good. It would be good use of the actor as well. And I love Peter Franzen anyway, so I would love to see him do more than a one-of in an episode or 2 and then be gone forever.
Right.
I think it would be good. Same as Huron. And I know we're going into book 2 here, but he's only in book 2, and then he comes back basically for the last battle. I mean, he comes back to parley with Rand, and then the last battle.
I was so looking forward to more of him.
Yeah.
As I read the books. He just
never came back.
Yeah.
So anyway,
that's so much.
Super tangential, though.
Yeah, but you could break this into multiple episodes if you need to.
I think we're going to have to. So you may see multiple parts of this, guys. I don't know what part this is going to be in.
I'll say, when it comes to the wolves, though, this is one of those things where I hope Rafe and his team figure it out, but I don't. What's the term? I don't envy their position. I understand that that's difficult, and I don't know how they're going to do it, and they're certainly not going to please everyone. However they choose, whether it's images in the head or Perrin making eye contact with a wolf and then sort of translating it like Hopper's upset or whatever it is. That's a tough one.
There's always going to be somebody angry about it, and there's always going to be somebody that says it's terrible and cheesy, and there's always going to be people that are going to like it either way. So, I mean, I'm going to cut them.
It's also possible that they do it one way one season, and like we haven't even mentioned this yet. We'll talk about this in the One Power discussion. But Rafe essentially says it's kind of up to the director in some of these situations.
Yeah.
So I'm sure they'll establish certain things that you should or shouldn't do when it comes to Perrin and the wolves. But sometimes the director may want to portray it in a different way. In the Harry Potter movies, the way they built Hogwarts in the first 2 movies, they realized for the 3rd movie they wanted to completely rebuild Hogwarts. And so they put what's his name, Hagrid's house further down a hill. They put Hogwarts much higher up on a hill. It wasn't that way in the first 2 movies. They basically rebuilt everything.
And what's funny is I didn't notice that at all until you just said it.
Yeah, it's fairly noticeable if you watch the movies side by side. But I think I remember hearing it in an interview. It's not like I picked up on it. But they decided for the 3rd movie and then beyond that they wanted to make Hogwarts feel more like a castle up on a hill, on sort of like a rocky, ledgy sort of area, and it wasn't that way at first. And so my point is, as the show progresses, they are going to sometimes make changes. They are going to sometimes say, well, that didn't work. Let's try this with the wolves. And so I think that's another thing we can do is be a little patient and just be like, okay, well, I see what they were trying to do there.
Yeah.
Maybe they can improve it later or something.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so I guess that's where we're going to stop here in this episode. So I want to thank you all for watching the video, and stay tuned for the community section up next. Hi everyone, welcome to the community section of my video, and I do want to thank you all for making it through that lengthy video. I do apologize for the length of it, and who am I kidding? I don't really apologize for the length of it. I had a blast making it. It was a lot of fun. It's a big, long video. If you got through at least part of it, I'm happy. But I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did making it. Now, today I have Recappa, Sedai, and Wheel Talk. Wheel Talk is a brand new YouTube channel, and we're talking just weeks old. It's in its infancy. So there's only a few videos on it, but the videos are so much fun. So I'm going to read a little blurb here that Recappa Sedai sent me. Wheel Talk is a safe place to geek out on Wheel of Time, and in the spirit of the Brown Asha, learn. Each week, Recappa Sedai recaps and delves a new chapter. Old fans and new readers are all welcome. So, I've left a link to the YouTube channel down below in the description box, as well as the website that Recappa Sedai is featured on. So, if you guys are brand new readers and you're just getting through the series for the very first time, this is a fantastic way to follow along with a YouTuber who's reading the series and talking about it as they go. Also, if you're a seasoned reader or a veteran fan, these videos are so much fun. Please go to Recappa Sedai's Wheel Talk and take a look at that channel. Support the channel, sub to it if you like it, and while you're there, leave a comment saying that you've seen Recappa Sedai here in the community section of my video, so they can tell how many people, saw this and went to their channel. So before I go, I do want to mention that the Wheel Time community is one of the best communities I've ever been part of. Everyone is so supportive, and everyone likes to lift everyone else up, and that includes brand new content creators. So as we get closer and closer to the show, and Wheel Time becomes more and more popular, we're going to see more and more people pop up. Please keep supporting everyone who does Wheel Time stuff, because the more people that do these things, the better off our fandom will be. All right, thank you so much for sticking with me here to the end, and here's to many more.